Straight up weird fight coming up this weekend at heavyweight. We have Rodrigo Nascimento. He's going to be taking on Francis Baudot. And Matt, for both of these guys, they've got some pretty famous training partners. For Baudot, I mean, at one point you would have had Francis Ngannou at the MMA Factory. Now, Coach Ferdinand Lopez. But you also have top-ranked future title challenger, and I can't stress that enough, Ciryl Gane. And if you look at it for Nascimento, a guy that trains out of American Top Team, you see a lot of famous guys in the pictures, couple of different Brazilians. I know Marcos Rogério de Lima, one of those guys, Juan Espino out of the Canary Islands. Juan, where you at? Seems like he's fighting now, and it's great to see that, and he almost beat a really tough out in Alexander Romanov.
That was a weird fight.
Some sketchy circumstances. Yeah, he just didn't like the end of it. Also has Marcus Almeida as well to round out that corner in terms of the jiu-jitsu. And I really want to throw a shout out before I hand it off, Matt, because we've seen this guy coach all the time. I know Dia Davis is one of those guys that works the boxing in American Top Team, but Coach Marcus D'Amata is a guy that we see every single weekend. It seemed like he was a part of every single fight at UFC 264. He's the little short guy, but man, does he ever pack a punch in terms of his coaching ability. So for Rodrigo Nascimento, you know exactly what you're going to get. 8-1 the total record. He was a big favorite in his last fight, taking on Chris Daukaus, where he decided he was going to strike, and not necessarily known for his striking acumen. He is a superb jiu-jitsu player. You saw that when he was able to submit Don'Tale Mayes, who again is a boxer, but you saw how strong he is, how dominant he can be on the ground. Decided he was going to throw a few single shots and leave his head out there, rock'em sock'em style, and Daukaus was able to totally outdo him. Same can be said for Alain Baudot, Matt, in his last fight against Tom Aspinall, and both of these guys took on really good fighters in their debuts. So let's throw it on back for just a second, and we'll talk about Alain Baudot, who's about to make his second time out with the UFC. Now he's taking on Alain Baudot, and this is a guy that, I mean, he trains out of another great gym in the world, MMA Factory. Main training partners include Francis Ngannou, Ciryl Gane, and you've seen Ferdinand Lopez just do big things in MMA. That's a gym that you definitely have to watch out for. Now, for Monsieur Alain, he's coming up from 205 pounds. He had a fight against not Sam Stout, but Todd Stout, guy that trains in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, for the TKO Light Heavyweight Championship. And listen, Matt, we've gone back. We watched that terrible highlight reel if you're not Dalcha champ with EFC. But if you're Alain Baudot, I mean, man, the guy got knocked out so hot and heavy against Dalcha Lujanbula. It didn't go his way. In the Todd Stout fight, he lost it. I mean, he threw caution to the wind in his striking, and then when it, you know, and I hate to use cliche, but when the rubber hit the road, the guy got taken down, Stout took his back, submitted him, and then, my God, it seems like every week we have to talk about a fighter whose fight's overturned to either a no contest or a loss. But Todd Stout, that fight is now a loss on his record, and for Alain Baudot, it's considered a win, even though he lost it. So for Alain Baudot, I just worry about the wildness of his striking. Yeah, will it win him some fights? I mean, it's won him 8 this far, 7. But in a fight against Tom Aspinall, man, I worry. So, Matt, that's the scoop on Alain Baudot, who's about to make his second time out with the UFC. This fight was originally scheduled to take place back in May, rebooked for July 17th. And if you look at it for Alain Baudot, not the greatest level of competition all the way up. He got knocked out emphatically by Dalcha Lujanbula, Dalcha champ, and then he ends up taking a fight against a guy who's 0-2. He fights Todd Stout, and as we say, it's a win on his record. He got absolutely owned by Todd Stout and submitted, and then somehow ends up in the UFC off that loss. He hasn't really seemed to gain a whole lot in the year and a half from the Stout fight to the Aspinall fight. Are we going to see anything different? And frankly, who's got the best shot here?
This is an interesting fight, even if we want to call it that. Here's the one thing both guys can kind of lean on. They both have a crutch. It's that you can't really judge them based on the last performance because guess what? Most heavyweights would lose to Chris Daukaus and Tom Aspinall. It's just a fact. Those are probably 1A and 1B for best prospects in the heavyweight division right now. If you want to have Ciryl Gane ahead of them, he's probably past the prospect phase, but I would say that those guys...
Yeah, I'd say a guy challenging for the title
That's what I mean. He would have been number 1, but now that he has kind of made more of a name for himself in the heavyweight division, I really do feel like guys like Aspinall and Daukaus are the future of this division. And for Nascimento, it was a weird fight against Dawkins, and I know that you were really impressed by his jiu-jitsu going into that fight, and for good reason. Like, his skills on the mat, they're really unique for a heavyweight because he not only has really good top pressure too, he's a guy who can sweep off of his back, which is honestly something you don't really see past like the middleweight division. It's weird. When Jacare fought Jack Hermanson, for instance, Jack Hermanson was able to take Jacare down and not really be too worried about the guard of Jacare, because it does feel like the bigger you get, the harder it really is to sweep guys on the top, and especially a guy like Jacare, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu specialists of all time. It's not that Jack Hermanson's a bad grappler, just the fact that Jack Hermanson is able to spend really minutes upon minutes in top position upon a guy who is so good at jiu-jitsu, it tells you that you can get away with grappling with some people. And for Nascimento, his problem was that he went out there trying to strike with Chris Dawkins, and I know Chris Dawkins is really good on the mat too, so even if they, let's say they kind of match each other in jiu-jitsu, it's really hard to go out there and outstrike a guy like Chris Dawkins, and even in the couple exchanges up until he did get dropped by Dawkins, he did land a decent jab. That's one thing that Nascimento is alright at. He can keep his opponent at somewhat far range with his jab. The problem is when he does fight those upper level strikers, like the Aspinalls, like the Dawkinses, who can move their head and really collapse that space, then he is going to have trouble. The great news is that Alain Baudot does not fight like that whatsoever. And I know we're normally extremely positive about guys when they come into the UFC, but I really do feel like our previous judgments on Alain Baudot do still ring true. Like, he's just not that great at the UFC level right now. And it sucks to say that, but like, for instance, Campaign right now is playing for the Phoenix Suns. He's in the finals. He's putting up big minutes. The Toronto Raptors didn't think he could play at the NBA level. Just because you're that thing now doesn't mean one day you can't become something different. It's just right now it's really hard for me to justify Alain Baudot's spot in the UFC.
Rodrigo Nascimento coming in this week, he was a minus 365. He's about a minus 342 or thereabouts. If we look at it for France's Alain Baudot, he opened a plus 275. He's a plus 269 right now. Over on Topology, surprise to us as it is to you. Holy smokes, 992 total votes, 93% Nascimento, 69% by submission. For the 7% that have Baudot, it's tough fun, 63% by knockout. If you look at it in the Alain Baudot fights, he likes to strike. I know the broadcast talks about it in his debut. He likes to do the spinning attacks, and he does. He leaves his head out there, and it's been an issue since the Dalchel and Jambula fight. Some of those fights that you can find in the regional scene, they're out there on YouTube. I know there's one on Fight Pass, but there's all kinds of tape on him out there. It's pretty easy to find it. For Rodrigo Nascimento, you look at it. Dana White's Contender Series, big win over there. Don'Tale Mayes, big win over there, like Alain Baudot's teammate had, Cyril Gane, a submission win over Mayes. But for me, I like the parts and parcels of Nascimento's game. Could he get caught like he did in the fight against Dawkins? Sure. But I like his opportunities a lot more than I do like out of Baudot, so I will ride with the Brazilian in this one.
It's just really hard for me to say that Alain Baudot can land like a clean check left hook on the inside like Dawkins can. Like, when it comes down to it, Dawkins can get into extended boxing combinations, or exchanges, with a lot of guys in the heavyweight division. Baudot does kind of need some space to get off his techniques, and it is weird because I wouldn't say he's at like the Morozov level of spamming spinning back fist, but he throws it way too much. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, we get it, but you're just making yourself tired. I do like, and here's the thing about Nascimento, if he does lose, it's gonna look bad. Like, if Alain Baudot does win at the UFC level, it is gonna be this crazy head kick or crazy spinning back fist. Like, it is gonna look really good if it ever does happen. I just don't think he's gonna be able to land one of those crazy techniques against a guy like Nascimento.
Easier said than done, but for Nascimento, Tom Aspinall went for a double leg, got it, and went fully into mount just like that. So, hey, it can be done, but in this fight, both of us going with American top teams, Rodrigo Nascimento to get the win. I can't wait for this card. Up at the top, the return of the former champion, Miesha Tate. She's taking on Marion Reneau. And in the main event, Islam Makhachev taking on Thiago Moises, Nascimento's teammates. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.